All right, welcome to FNTV. This is the channel to watch if you are interested in stocks traded on Nasdaq First North. And today, from company headquarters in Norway, we are joined again by Torbjørn Jenssen, the CEO of Arcane Crypto. Nice to see you again, Torbjørn.
Nice to be back.
All right, to start things off, we have the chat open if anyone wants to post questions there. But I want to start things off by asking you, Torbjørn, it's been a good quarter for cryptocurrencies, right? Bitcoin was up 25% or so from July to September.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the momentum has continued after the quarter, kind of accelerated with the first ETF being approved by regulators in the US, showing how much institutional demand there is out there. And of course, while it's nice that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the sector is kind of reaching new all-time highs, what is more important to us in Arcane is the accelerated adoption, the infrastructure that's being built out, the regulation that is coming in place, which is kind of creating the foundation for this to become a meaningful part of the financial system in the future.
Right, and you just released your Q3 earnings report this morning. Are you satisfied with the results?
I'm really happy, and we have reached several key milestones during the quarter. We successfully launched our mining operation. Actually, we launched it straight after the quarter, but we planned for that during the quarter. We have hired a new CFO. We are in the process of appointing new board members. And most importantly, we've kind of done the first work of developing the Arcane platform. And actually this week launched the very first iteration of that. So yeah, it's been a great quarter.
Yeah, exciting times. So let's get into the numbers. You mentioned that you're on track to become cash flow positive in the report, but revenues quarter over quarter is down and EBITDA was a loss of 6 million. Why?
Yeah, so if you look at the revenue, that is primarily due to a little bit lower trading volume on Kaupang and the way that is accounted for. During Q3, although Bitcoin appreciated a lot, the market activity was actually globally down 40% if you look at volume. So that lower trading volume also hit Kaupang, and then kind of that translated into our top line. Looking at our gross margin on sales, however, that actually increased from 5.5 to 7.5 million, showing kind of the underlying growth in revenue. And when it comes to being cash flow positive, or our expectation of being that from the start of next year, that is also going to be amplified by the mining revenue coming in from this quarter and from the start of next year. In terms of the EBITDA, we have a reported loss of around 6 million. This is kind of, if you just look at the numbers, it's kind of a drop compared to the previous quarter. However, previous quarter was due to some technicalities around accounting in relation to some options, came out a little artificially kind of on the positive side. So it's very much aligned. There's no major changes there. So yeah.
So in Q3 then, just for the folks who following this to understand, there's some seasonality effects that affect the trading in cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it was summer, right? So there's typically a little bit lower trading activity over the summer. And also, although Bitcoin kind of appreciated, we came into the quarter from a cooling down of the market, which affected kind of the first half, 2/3 of the quarter and the trading activity there. So that also affected us. We had much better development than the market overall, but it also hit us on the brokerage side.
Right. And so also to explain for those who might not be so familiar with cryptocurrencies in general, with this positive development that we've seen for Bitcoin, your strategy though is to be more like an investment company in the cryptocurrency space, right? So do you want to remind the viewers of what the investment case is in investing in Arcane versus buying, for example, Bitcoin directly, which some might reflect on would have been given a higher return?
Yeah, so Arcane, we're building out the infrastructure for making cryptocurrencies accessible to end users. So an investment in Arcane is a bet on this industry growing. And over time, that means that we will generate revenue based on activity in the sector and our ability to take a market share, not the price of any single coin. In the short term, there might be correlation between price development and activity, but in the longer term, however, those are two different drivers. And if you want to have a diversified exposure, you should hold both. And if you believe that cryptocurrencies are going to play a meaningful part of the financial system in the future, companies like Arcane is offering that type of exposure without having the full volatility from something like Bitcoin. That said, however, if you want to buy Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, you should do that on Trio if you're in Sweden, Kaupang in Norway, or if you're an accredited investor through our fund. So we have products for you in that case.
So it's two very different kind of investments. One is in a single currency, for example, that you can trade on your platform, but buying shares in Arcane Crypto is also giving you exposure to the whole sector and more of a long-term bet. Is that correct summary?
Yeah, you can think of it as investing in oil versus not an oil extractor, but oil services companies. Oil services companies are benefiting when there are investments in the sector and it's being built out. That's a different exposure than the oil itself. And it's even more detached here where you do see a lot of investments in infrastructure and you see the sector growing without that having to translate to any specific asset appreciating.
Got it. So to that end then, are there any particular other highlights that you want to point out during the quarter, milestones that you've hit?
Yeah, I guess I can highlight a milestone in Pure Digital, one of our portfolio companies where we have a 37.5% stake. They had a first test trade. So Pure is building this interbank market for really the top of the top banks in the world to trade Bitcoin and digital assets. And to have had this test trade is a great milestone showing that they are continuing to execute on their product roadmap. It's also great to notice that the test trade was done with a partner called Zodia, which is a institutional grade custodian owned by Standard Chartered and Northern Trust. So that speaks to that adds to the already published information that it's Boney and State Street that are 2 out of 6 banks that are involved. So it really shows the type of appetite and that Pure is continuing to deliver on that front.
Right, and you also completed a direct share issue, right? Raising 61 million Swedish kronor?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was instrumental in us strengthening our balance sheet and giving us the financial tools to really continue our growth and accelerate going forward. We've taken most of that money, if you like, and reinvested it in our green data mining operation. And a big benefit of that is that that's an investment that's generating cash flow right away. There's no lead time, there's no platform that needs to be built out. And this is a key reason for why we expect to become cash flow positive already from the start of next year. So not only enables this investment us to contribute to the Bitcoin network, securing the blockchain that we depend on with clean energy, it enables us to do product development, develop trading strategies on the flow, but it also is a highly profitable endeavor, securitizing our future funding in many ways.
Right, and I also noticed that you released the news of that you're strengthening up the board with some new appointments. What is the significance of that for the shareholders?
Yes, so we are bringing, or the election committee has proposed 2 new board members, a new chairman in Michael Jackson, who has a very strong background from the tech industry, both operationally. He was the COO of Skype early 2000s during that period where Skype commercialized. He's been a board member of blockchain.com, one of the really big companies in the crypto industry for a long time. And he has been a partner of Mangrove Capitals, coming with a VC background. So he's bringing both a lot of relations, but more importantly, a lot of knowledge and understanding, which will be important as we sharpen our strategy to have that type of competence in the board. It's also proposed to add another board member who has background from a lot of early stage companies, Simon Sandbach, digital brand building, which will also help us execute as well as absolutely possible on the branding, communication, scaling up the business side. So I'm really looking forward to work closely with these people and the rest of the board going forward.
Great. So we also have a question coming in here then from the chat. It's related to M&A. Is the plan to acquire additional regulated European crypto exchanges and integrate them into the new platform as well? I guess it's hard for you to comment on what is to come, but I guess that's a general question then you can address regarding your M&A plans.
Yeah, so to bring everything back, when we started Arcane, the idea was to build up an initial portfolio. And we did that both by hiring people and bootstrapping some business ourselves and through acquisitions. Now we've had this kind of initial portfolio that we are consolidating on this unified platform. Right now, our focus is on really developing that platform. We are planning to do M&A in the future when the maturity of the platform is at the level where an acquisition can be kind of justified by the synergies of really lifting that company in. So that we, for instance, we will be looking for kind of acqui-hires if there's really great teams where it's basically the team that you're acquiring, but also acquisitions where what we're buying is local licenses and where what we're adding is kind of the returns to scale from a unified platform. So a long answer to say, yes, we're going to explore this. It's not the main focus right now. The main focus right now is on improving the platform, which will long-term be the core to which we can add products, licenses, features, teams through acquisitions.
Great. I had another question come in here. Can you elaborate more on your planned mining operations, infrastructure investments, break-even, etc.?
Yeah, so we have kind of the first batch of miners live and running. Currently generating revenue right now. We have a second batch of miners coming in from the start of next year. That will, in total, fill up the full capacity we have at the current data center. And our aim is not to accumulate those Bitcoin, but rather to put them to work through our trading product and explore productization of the mining. Basically exploring mining as a service where we, over time, will expect to be able to offer our end clients not only the ability to invest in crypto sort of fund, so invest in mining, hosted mining. In terms of scaling up further, that is something that we are currently discussing and working kind of both at management level and with the board exploring. In that regard, it will be likely that we do that in several different jurisdictions to get more robustness in terms of exposure to electricity prices, etc. What is important to us is that it's renewable energy. And our role in the value chain, if you like, is from owning the machines and all the added both services, trading that comes kind of following ownership. We're not going to specialize in building data centers.
Okay, got it. So if we continue then on your main priorities now during Q4, I see that in the report you're talking a lot about bringing the companies even closer together with one common tech stack, leading to better experience for the end customer. Do you want to elaborate? You talked a little bit about that, but do you want to elaborate a little bit further on what you're doing there? Yeah,
absolutely. So right now, the new website, if you like, looks like exactly that, just a new website, just a new kind of brand design, because we are right now linking out to the different services. What is going to start happening through Q4 is that we'll add login, and some of these services will become integrated and kind of on the new platform. And we will continue that over several quarters. This is a long process, but we will kind of iteratively bring more and more of these services onto this new platform. The really powerful ability we then get is that we get the scalability. We're building this on Google Cloud, leveraging their platform as a service approach to cloud services, which allows us to kind of scale seamlessly and leverage the kind of expertise of Google. So we don't need to manage all of the services and figure out how much load we will have. When we get more load, we can just scale that up seamlessly. We're also tying that in with Google Analytics. We are going to use a lot of data techniques to analyze our users' behavior to learn how to develop the best product possible. So one example would be that we will run a ton of experiments showing half of the users one type of interface tweak and the other half another tweak, and see what is most effective. And through this design methodology, where we will not push anything out just because I have a feeling or an expert have an opinion, but we will formulate hypothesis and test it, and then iteratively go with what is working. To be able to do that, you need all of those kind of back-end setups to have the infrastructure. That is what we've set up during this quarter. And then from Q4 and going forward, as an end user, you'll start to see a high frequency of new features and iterations of this platform evolving.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about macroeconomic trends too, which affect the cryptocurrency market. If we start with the inflations and perhaps the developments in China, anything else that you want to touch upon?
Yeah, there's a lot happening. I guess the fear of inflation is intensifying. We see that the surprisingly high, surprising to some at least, high inflation earlier this year seems to be less transitory and more persistent than what a lot of officials communicated. And when it becomes more persistent than what they've communicated, that makes more investors worry about the value of their currency. And this is particularly relevant in the US. And this means that investors are starting to look for alternative investments. That can be gold, that can be shares, that can be in the property market. But the narrative of Bitcoin as a digital gold, as a hedge against inflation, is only getting stronger. And we see this in this increased institutional demand for Bitcoin as an asset class. With regards to China, it's very interesting because just before the summer, they banned mining, contributing to the profitability of currently mining. But after the summer, they even took it a step further and banned cryptocurrency transactions, if you like. And a lot of people thought that that would have a very big negative impact on the market. What happened, however, was Bitcoin saw a, let's say, 9%, 10% drop, and nothing dramatic at all. So what was then initially viewed as something negative turned out to be a positive. It showed how resilient Bitcoin was. It showed that even if China shuts it down, it doesn't really care. And also it removed a lot of the fear and uncertainty, especially yet again from US investors who were afraid of what can China do with all the mining that used to be there? What can they do if that is the center of gravity? Now, the US is the biggest nation in the world when it comes to mining, to securing the Bitcoin blockchain. That means that there's a lot of business in the US linked to cryptocurrency, which kind of creates a more positive political environment for it. And then, of course, it's worth mentioning El Salvador executing on rolling out Bitcoin as a legal tender. And while El Salvador is a tiny country, and it's still an open question how many will follow, how fast, what that really shows is that there are a lot of myths that are now debunked. People thought that you couldn't buy coffee with Bitcoin because it was too expensive and too slow. Yet now you can walk into any coffee store in El Salvador and buy coffee with Bitcoin. You can even walk into a McDonald's or a Starbucks and pay with Bitcoin over the Lightning Network. So it's showing the world the Lightning Network. And with more and more people realizing how what they thought was true about Bitcoin is not true anymore, more and more people take it serious, and it helps accelerate adoption.
And on that note, too, you mentioned in the report the significance of the US Bitcoin ETF discussions. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so in the crypto space, we waited for an ETF approval for a really long time.
What is an ETF? Perhaps we need to explain that to the viewers.
So an ETF is an exchange-traded fund. So there's a lot of investors who either don't want to go to a cryptocurrency exchange because they don't understand it, they're not comfortable, or really can't due to mandates limiting them from what they can invest in. What they can invest in, however, is funds that are listed, where Bitcoin could be the underlying. So you could have a fund that is tracking Bitcoin, and then investors could invest in that product. And that is what an ETF is. To have such a product, the SEC, the financial regulators in the US, will have to approve the fund. And this is for investor protection. And for the longest time, they viewed the underlying market as being too immature to approve such a fund. That meant that there were a lot of investors that couldn't get access to Bitcoin exposure through the instrument they wanted exposure. Now, when they have approved the first fund, backed by futures, but still Bitcoin exposure, we saw the biggest ETF launch in US history. It reached a total value in the fund of $1 billion in just 2 days. And it had $1 billion trading volume on the very first day. And this shows the massive demand for Bitcoin exposure, unsatiated demand for Bitcoin exposure that was out there. But as importantly, it shows how regulation is slowly but surely, together with the market, maturing. So this is in many ways also a kind of really important milestone for Bitcoin's regulatory maturity to now have an ETF and have that stamp of approval from the SEC in many ways.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that out. We are about running out of time here, but I have one question that several investors asked me when they heard that I'm doing this interview with you today, which is, what do you think about the value of the Bitcoin currency in general now in the fourth quarter? We've seen a dip and then it's come up again. What is your take on what's going on?
So I have a very positive view. We see the adoption accelerating. We see the infrastructure being built out. I'm not going to put out a price estimate. I have my own personal ideas, but that's not too important for what we're doing at Arcane. As I said earlier, what we're doing is building out the services making cryptocurrencies more accessible. And our business model is to primarily make money from users engaging with the cryptocurrency space and us enabling to do so. So, yeah, I have a positive view, but that is primarily driven by the strong adoption we're seeing, which is what is kind of the real relevant or main factor that is important to Arcane's development long term.
Okay, I'm going to grab one last question here from the chat. What is going on with Tesla Coil?
Yeah, so Tesla Coil was earlier this year integrated with Kaupang, and we had pilot customers using that version of Tesla Coil. What we learned through that piloting phase was that, yes, we can solve real problems for companies. We saw use and we saw that for some payments it was superior, but we also saw that for this to be something that we can really scale and really roll out big, we need to kind of build this on a stronger technical footing. So the Tesla Coil project, kind of using cryptocurrencies as payment, is a part of the tech roadmap for the unified platform. Having seamless and efficient exchanging between traditional currencies and cryptocurrencies in many ways a prerequisite for being able to do a payment via a cryptocurrency as the payment rail. And we want to build this in a way where we can scale this to kind of millions of transactions and billions of dollars in volume, which means that we will spend the time it takes to take the learning points from the pilot version of the software and build that as a part of this new platform. And on that note, I can also mention that when we're setting the platform up now, we're doing it with the idea of opening up our APIs to third parties in the future, which is kind of something we have to think about now because it informs how we design the whole architecture. And what that means in practice is that in the future, we expect apps like Swish in Sweden, Vipps in Norway, we expect every bank, every payment company to have some crypto service. And by building so that we can open our APIs, we will be able to then enable these companies to use us as an infrastructure partner. And it's through that type of integration we foresee a future where we will facilitate payments also over cryptocurrencies in the Tesla Coil way described in earlier presentations.
Okay, great. Thanks for clearing that out too. So that is all the time we have today. Thank you again, Torbjørn, for joining us all the way from Norway, and thank you everyone for watching.